From Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. Today we're going to have a little bit of fun arranging some flowers using flower frogs. Now many of you have asked me what are these objects that I use when I'm doing some country bouquets, and I'm sure plenty of you know exactly what these are. You might even collect them yourself. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how I use them, a little bit about the history of flower frogs, and what a great collectible they are. I think these are delightful objects for the garden enthusiast or the floral arranger or anybody that collects vintage garden implements. They're a lot of fun to use. They make arranging flowers a lot easier by keeping your flowers in place. And they're just really interesting little pieces of history in some cases. So the history of flower frogs dates back to the 14th century in Japan. And they didn't look like this. I have no idea what they looked like. But it was for a specific type of Japanese flower arrangement. I'm going to concentrate on the more recent flower frogs, dating from about the 1920s, 1930s, and all the way up to the 1950s. So here I have gathered together the last of my flower gardens for the season. I've got just a few things here, slim pickings. But we've got a lot of different sizes and shapes of vessels to accommodate the flower frogs. And we're going to use them accordingly. Why are they called frogs? Well, because they're placed in the water where they sit very still. As far as I've been able to discover, these were used in the Victorian times, but they were really popular in the 1920s and 1930s, where women all around the world took great pride in their ability to make beautiful flower arrangements. So most of these are probably from the 20s and 30s, and some of them from the 50s. The one you most often find, at least that's I found the most common, are the glass flower frogs. And you can see that they have holes. Generally, they go all the way through the bottom. These frogs could be used either at the top of a vase or a vessel or at the bottom. But some of the flower frogs are a little bit deeper, and they do not have holes that travel all the way through. Other glass frogs are a little bit taller, more in a dome shape like this one, and the holes which hold the stems do not go all the way through to the bottom. So these would have to be used in the bottom of your vessel. Here's another one, different shape. I just love the different shapes that they come in. And this one has holes that do not go through the bottom. Frogs are really beautiful to collect because they come in many different colors, from blues, greens, yellows, purples, cobalt, oranges. Carnival glass in the case of this little frog. And just look at the variety of shapes, from flat to pyramid shape, rounded, flat, even flatter, and even, in the case of this beautiful green one, it's embossed all along the edges here. And sometimes date these by the style, or if you're lucky enough, it has a marking on the bottom. This flat one, it's pretty small. It's a flat glass top, flat glass sides, and this one is an early one. It's dated on the bottom, patented in 1903. Next we have the metal cage frogs, and these also come in many different shapes and sizes. They go all the way through from the top to the bottom, so you could use these on the top of your vessel or on the bottom of the vessel. Some are squared shape, some are rounded, like a bird cage, and one of my favorites is actually this one. I like this one because it's got this kind of design all along the edge. And it's a thinner metal, and it's green. It's one of my favorites. Cage flower frogs were invented in 1916 by the Daisy Company, and oftentimes they'll be marked on the bottom Daisy flower holder, but no date. But I'd say that for most of these flower frogs that are on this table anyway, the date would be accurate to say anywhere between early 1900s to 1950. Now, that's not to say they're not still making flower frogs, because they are, but you can tell an old one from a new one pretty easily. It's really interesting because it's actually expandable. The purpose for that is, I don't know, probably you can change the size according to the vase you're going to be putting it in, or the type of flower arrangement you want to do, because you can actually put flowers in the side here. And they also think it would be adaptable if the mouth of your container was smaller and you needed to fit it in, and it didn't quite make it. That's the only reason I can think of for that being collapsible like this. Now this one fits wonderfully right over the top of this small flower vase, which is probably from the 1920s. And also, I think that possibly this could be a design element just to make it more interesting around your flowers. If you put it out like so, you've got this little decor, flower decor, all the way around the edge. They're called hairpin frogs. I think these are actually my very favorite, just because they're so different and so interesting looking. And they also have a very interesting history. A woman named Ida Sinclair was an avid flower arranger. She actually participated in many county fairs and won many blue ribbons. Well, she designed a flower frog for her arrangements by creating a base and sticking her hairpins in the base to create her flower arrangements. And a friend of hers said, "You know, Ida, you should patent that design." And because Ida was a blue ribbon winner, she did patent this design, and she named her company the Blue Ribbon Flower Holder Company in Ohio, Cayuga Falls, Ohio. And that was in the year 1929. Now this is more of a novelty flower frog, and it's actually a flower turtle. As you can see, it's in the shape of a little turtle. It's a heavy metal. It's meant to go in the bottom of a container, and preferably a clear glass container, so that you can actually see the little turtle through the glass on the bottom. Now this little turtle here, I just keep him with the flower frog because I think he's a nice companion. Now here we have probably what I think is the most practical of the flower frogs. These are pin frogs. As you can see, they have very sharp little spikes in them. They also come on a base, which is either a heavy ceramic or a metal base, which holds them securely in the bottom of your vase. They come in tiny, tiny sizes like this, all the way up to pretty large sizes, and small, and medium, And I don't have any really large ones, but you can use a combination of these in the bottom of a vessel if you have to. But what these are really great for are woody plants with a nice strong stem. But they also work pretty well for these dahlias, because this dahlia is just in perfect position here, holding it just beautifully. Oops, I thought. But you can see how easily this holds a little dahlia, fitting in between the spikes, or right on one of the needles, going straight and directly into the spike or the pin. Lastly, we have the ceramic flower frogs. These were made by artists and also by companies such as Weller. Sometimes they're marked on the bottom. I'm not sure of the dates on these. I think these are a little bit later than the wire and the cage flower frogs. Nobody knows who coined the name frog for the flower frogs, because the original frogs were actually called flower holders, flower blocks, and flower arrangers, but not flower frogs. I think many of these colored ones, especially this one in particular, because of the vase and the color of the glass, these make me think Depression glass era, and especially these amber colored pieces. The flower frogs fell out of favor when these foam blocks were introduced for flower arrangement. They were highly water absorbent, and you could press the flower stems right into those blocks. Of course, you can still buy these today. And so these really took the place of flower frogs, and they basically stopped mass producing the frogs around 1959. So now let's take a look at how we can put many of these to use in the different size of vessels and vases. Using some of the glass frogs, we're going to use this beautiful embossed frog on top of this little Depression era vase, and a little domed frog inside this very small and shallow container here. It seems as though this little 1930s vase and this flower frog were meant for each other, because they fit perfectly, and this one fits right on the top. And this is actually the way I prefer to use them. Now, what could be easier than just placing your stems in these little holes? Large green glass vase, I'm using a cage flower frog in the very bottom, but I'm also using a cage metal flower frog in the top, but I'm not putting it upright. I'm going to fit it right here in the top. That way, when I've got really, really long stems, they're not only catching on the top, but they're also being secured down there in the bottom of the vase. So in this vase, I used 2 flower frogs, and I've got geraniums, lasagna daisies, purple carnations, and anise. Okay, we've got some zinnias here, which have a little bit past their best, but they still look fine in a vase. And actually, you know, you can let them dry in your vase. If you want them for dried flowers, do that all the time. You don't have to hang them upside down. Just let them turn brown right in your vase. And then use them later on as dried flower arrangements, or just drain the water out of your vase and keep them right where they are. Said it many times before, I don't do formal flower arrangements. I wouldn't even know how if I tried. Mine are just like a cottage garden in a vase. In fact, these are weeds, but I think they're really pretty weeds. So I'm going to use these for filler. And as usual, everything just goes right in those holes, fits right in so beautifully and stands up just the way you want it to. Here I've used a clear glass container with a collapsible metal frog. You can't really see the scalloped edges here unless you really look for them. And some aged zinnias, some bishop's weed, and this beautiful little purple weed, which I don't know the name of. A simple cottage garden in a vase. You don't have to be a florist to make a prettier frame. I need to put these little dahlias to use that I planted from seed. Aren't they beautiful? Just simple little dahlias. But they're just kind of flopping around, and nasturtium leaves. They're just flopping around in this little soup bowl of mine. But that's because I don't have a flower frog on the bottom. So I think I'm going to try to use, maybe we'll use the pin flower frogs this time. Look at this. These have been under the water for 2 days. That's very weird. They've become translucent. Isn't it kind of beautiful, isn't it? Look at that. You can see right through the leaf. Wow, that'd be great if you could maintain that look for about a week. We'll see what happens. Actually, one of my soup bowls, one of my lettuce soup bowls, it's a nice shallow bowl. And if you have a nice shallow vessel and you want to do a flower arrangement, I think these pins really work well. So I might use a couple of them in here. Yeah, I think so. And we will start putting our beautiful little dahlias in here. See? Isn't that great? The way they just stand up in there. Pin frogs, I think, would work best with thicker stems, more woody stems, rather than these very thin dahlias. Although they did work just fine. As you can see, they're all standing up precisely the way I want them to. And so in here we have the dahlias, which are the yellow ones, the pinkish ones, and also some of these bright reds are dahlias, and then we have red carnations, nasturtium leaves, and Russian sage. To check out these hairpin frogs, so I'm just experimenting outside of the vase, because once I put it in the vase you won't even be able to see it. So let's just see how well these do. So here we have a zinnia, and let's see how these blue ribbon, well, that holds that pretty well. It's doing pretty well with the heavy dahlia here. And here we have another dahlia. These dahlias in my garden are just now starting to open. These look great in clear glass so that you can actually see the hairpin flower frog through the glass. And they hold pretty well. I think they're better for the large stemmed flowers. But I think as far as collectibles go, these really are my favorites. And I don't know that they're that easy to find, but I do know they come in really interesting shapes. Turned glass, so I really can't see the flower frog that well through it. So instead I'm going to use it in an antique green pitcher. So here I have another beautiful bouquet using the hairpin frog. and really simple to use. It holds the flowers in place really nicely. And what I have in this bouquet are some dahlias, some purple basil, bishop's weed, some gazania daisies, some Bathsheba roses from the garden. Actually, everything here is from the garden. This is just what's left over at the end of the season. And some beauty berries. I love to use beauty berries in bouquets, even though they have a tendency to just fall right off. I used is an antique yellowware green pitcher. Well, I've got just a few flowers left, not very many, and a couple little vessels here. I have a beautiful little old cup, Japanese cup. I still have this little turtle in the bottom of this fish bowl, and I don't know what I'm going to do, what I'm going to use in them, but I think in this one I will use one of the pins. The pin. A lot of these would work in the little cup. The little glass one would work. With 8 holes, no, 7 holes. But I think this one, this metal cage, would be more useful. Seems like I have a lot of red flowers today. So the flower frog inside this old teacup makes it a lot easier to keep these flowers from just flopping right out of the sides. And so here we have some violet leaves, some red geraniums, some little forget-me-nots, and some coral red ground roses. And I just go around trying to find everything I can that's growing in the garden, even if it's a weed. If it's pretty, I'll use it. So the last demonstration will be for the little flower frog that's shaped like a turtle, and it's in this very tiny little fish bowl, and we're going to fill it with some very simple flowers, just some yellow and orange marigolds, some black-eyed Susan, and some black-eyed Susan seed pods. Just got little bees hanging around the table. You're a little upset with me for taking a lot of these flowers out of the garden. I've ever made so many bouquets in one sitting, but it's so easy and enjoyable when you use the flower frogs. Now, if you do not have a garden or you don't want to make bouquets, it's not your purpose, you just like to collect old garden implements, flower frogs can be used for a lot of other things. You can get really creative with them. Aside from holding flowers, these little flower frogs are convenient for a lot of different items, such as scissors, small scissors, tiny bottles of perfume, postcards, business cards, plant markers, hairpins, seed packets, pencils, paintbrushes, postcards, so they really do make great collectibles and useful items. Cost-wise, these are fairly inexpensive and easy to find. Thrift stores, antique shops. You can also often pick these up for anywhere from $1 to $3. The more interesting types usually run around $15 to $18. Blue, the color blue, and a glass one, I've found those to be the most expensive. For the clear glass, I actually don't have any of those, but I think they're really a great collectible, but they're just so useful too if you are a flower person. who loves to arrange bouquets. Simple bouquets. Nothing fancy. Or you can get fancy if you like, but I'm just pretty much simple when it comes to the bouquets. Any petals, leaves, or flower debris that has landed on the table during the process of putting together your flower frog bouquets, we'll just sweep that into a little pile. We'll put it in a wooden bowl, let it dry, because we're going to be using it in next week's project, which is the making of potpourri. So we'll see you next time from Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. Bye-bye.